this is fast. Let's see.
It says we're live on YouTube.
Ha! Fantastic. Right. Hello, everyone. Bear with me, bear with me. I just need to get the link. There. Okay. All right, Jason, you've got the link on Discord.
Excellent.
And let's see what's happening here. All right, so we are now on YouTube. Hello to everybody who's joining in on the live stream. Hello, Andrea LaPlante. Hello to Cheryl K. Hello to all those of you who are just joining in. It's always wonderful to know that our community is here at a moment's notice, ready to jump onto a crazy last minute pop-up. That's exactly what this is. It's a crazy last minute pop-up. Hello, Sarah, my darling. Sarah Ulhaus in Germany. Jenny Runco, Tracy Blanchard. Hey, Erin, Susan Worthington. So glad I'm catching this. So glad you're here. So glad that all those of you who are here on the live stream saw the notification in time. We literally put the notification out half an hour before going live. So whoever catches that notification, good luck to you. And of course, there's always the replay for everybody else. Welcome, Jason Estes.
Thank you. Yeah, it felt like it was a very important conversation to have today with what's going on.
It's a surprising. I always ask Jason, what are we talking about? And Jason always has absolute knowing about what we're going to talk about. And when I realized the topic of today, negative ETs explained, something must be going on to prompt you to bring this up now.
Yeah.
What's happening?
It's huge, actually. So we're now under the protection of the Galactic Federation, which is a huge thing. But what that means is now we're in T1 cleanup. So we're now Tier 1 cleanup. And so it's a bit strange. These next 3 weeks, we're going to be cleaning out all the negative ETs on the planet. And everybody's like, well, but the Galactic Federation is doing it. And all this. No, we as humanity reached a level of consciousness where we were able to work with new tools. It's not that they're coming in and disempowering us. It's that we're a new level of consciousness where we're capable to begin to work with greater tools than what we had before. And then there's this whole thing where people are like, well, the Galactic Federation of Light is evil and dark, and so how can we trust them? And you know what? Actually, you're kind of correct there. Galactic Federation of Light. Of light. So this world was inverted. So if it's of light, you can probably not trust it. But if it's Galactic Federation, and it's just that, I mean, like, they would never say of light because they don't care. That's not like, it's kind of like being like, I'm Lord Sanandra. No, what that? No, it's just that person, right? So kind of being aware of the misconceptions and the lies and the tricksters. Tricksters love, and this is again with negative ETs, right? Because tricksters love to mess with you. They will take your concept and they'll apply it so that they can make something look cleaner than it is. But if you actually take the time to really sit with it, you can tell a huge difference. And it's about the frequency. So right now, these next 3 weeks is going to be weird because when these things are dug in as much as they're dug in, and they're dug in, I mean, they've had 9,000 years to find spaces within spaces within spaces of time and just sit there and allow their corruption, which is the only way I can describe it, to kind of like filter out into this like energetic fog that basically keeps you asleep unless you can rise above it. So what's happening, and the reason this is possible, is we're on this train, right? And since we're on this train, we're now in a transit line of reality headed to where we're going. And because we're in a transit line, we're able to let the line be deconstructed and worked on. So these next few weeks, we're under heavy maintenance. And the best way you can describe it is as these beings are pulled out of the subspace into the dimension, they exist in our dimension for about half a second. But that half a second, oh, look, it's a fairy in the corner there. It's beautiful.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was amazing.
That half a second is that moment when everything kind of ripples across and we're like, oh, what just happened? And the only way I can describe that is these beings, you know, their true presence has never been felt. Only the ripple or the effect of their presence, or that fog of corruption, right? And for those of you doing clear commands, fog of corruption or negative ETs, fog of corruption, huge clear commands. So today is a little different because we're going to be talking about using all the tools that we've covered over the last few years so that you can actually start applying this stuff. Because this is the new world. The new world is you're in control. Take care of yourself. So as these beings are being uprooted, their true presence is felt, and their true presence is like being thrown boiling water on. Like you feel it, and you're like, what? And then the parts of you that have been dialed into their corruption are also coming up. And so you feel a little bit more anxious, you feel a little bit more irritated, you have doubts and fears. Suicide is like a number one topic people are talking about. They're like, well, I mean, I can just commit suicide. And the reason is because that's like the self-destruct mechanism. That was the last thing. And you're going to notice a lot of things like Twitter is starting to self-destruct. Facebook is starting to self-destruct. Instagram is starting to self-destruct. All of these things are self-destructing because they can't not. As we continue to progress forward and truth becomes the currency of the new world, the things that are not true, we're going to be able to see. But because we've been under this collective fog for so long, it's going to feel new to us to see it as it is. Because those blinders, those things that once kept you asleep and awake, or asleep and unaware, rather, not awake, are being removed. And these next 3 weeks is that. This is the beginning of what I call total disclosure. And 2021 is the year of disclosure. I've said this for a while, but now you guys are going to actually get to understand what that means. There's no curtain. Everything's really obvious. We're already starting to see things. But now even the things that are creating the fog, that confusion, that chaos, that fog that kept you from seeing clearly are falling apart. And it's going to be weird these next 3 weeks because you're going to feel the uprootedness. You're going to feel that like splash of boiling water, but you've been in boiling water this whole time. So when it does come up, like if you feel it's in your brain, you just put your hand on your brain, the spot that you feel it's at, and just tap very subtly. But you start out by putting your hand there first. This is an acknowledgement that you know that something is there. And then you begin to break up that thing that you know is there. So it's a really easy thing to do. We don't have to struggle through these things. We can actually enjoy being disconnected from these things as we find our true presence. Because our true presence has been hidden because their true presence was hidden. So now that they're being removed, and the hardest part probably going to be this weekend, to be honest with you, because the heavier ETs are being pulled out first. And so we're being hit with the hardest part. And as we progress forward these next 3 weeks, it's going to be easier and easier and easier. This also means there's going to be a fallout worldwide, though, because as people begin to realize the truth, whatever that is, doesn't matter, because I'm okay with whatever the truth is, as long as it's true. We're going to start to question things in ways we haven't before, because we have the bandwidth to do so. You see, fog still takes up room. And when you don't have room, you can't actually look at things. You can't critically think. You can't take the space necessary. So what we had to do was learn to evolve beyond the fog. And as we did that, we punctured holes in it, right? Like we created holes in the fog where others could come through. That fog is being removed completely. So it doesn't require someone follow the path we did anymore because it won't exist anymore. So we're all going to collectively race through where the fog used to be because there is no fog anymore. And this is what is required for us to transit into the next sector, so to speak. We're in the new sector, but we're in the transit of the new sector. So as we're going through this process of like, okay, I left all my bags at the station, I'm in faith, I trust, I know this is going to work out, I just don't understand how. We're beginning to like look out the window of the train and we're seeing all these beings that look like octopuses and squids and all these weird things that we've never imagined seeing. And we're like, okay, I feel like I might be in a horror movie right now. And that's the shock, and that's going to happen. We're going to have a collective shock. It's going to happen. So don't freak out about that it's happening. Instead, acknowledge, hey, I'm in shock. I can't believe my own eyes. But don't let other people tell you what you see. And I can't stress that enough. Don't let other people tell you what you see. If you see something, work with it. That's what you see. Doesn't matter if it's wrong or right, because what you see is what you see. That's where you are on the journey. So if you see a crazy unicorn that looks evil, cool. You see a crazy unicorn that looks evil. If someone else says, no, that's a squid, be like, well, for you, it could be a squid, right? Because we're all going to see what we're going to see. And that's what we need to see. So even though this is going to be a trying, difficult time for the next 3 weeks, as we mentally are exhausted, as we begin to see things we didn't know that we could even understand or see, and we come into the space of true empowerment, my PSA for today is suicide is not the way. It's not. But you're going to feel it. Almost everyone will feel suicidal at some point over these next 3 weeks. And why? Is because that option has to be taken off the board. And what that means is you actually have to discover and explore suicide. And I know this sounds weird from me saying, hey, don't do that. But like if you actually don't sit down with yourself and talk to yourself about suicide and actually work through it, it's going to be an unknown factor behind you. And I've seen it a lot in my students recently. They're going through this suicidal feeling because that self-destruct button, it makes sense for them to push it because they're afraid to push it. You can come to a space of acceptance that suicide exists and also that it's not your option. And if you can do that, then you never have to worry about suicide ever again because you've neutralized it. But as long as we're afraid that we're going to commit suicide or that we fear these concepts, then a part of us is always going to be exploring it. And that part of us is going to keep us out of full presence. So as these negative ETs come up and we feel like we've lost and we feel we can't handle anything. And again, it's only half a second, but there's so many of them, there's trillions of them. So as each one is popped out, it's like a wave hits us. But there's so many of them being pulled out that it feels like we're in the ocean. And remember, I call it the ocean of emotion for a reason. Those waves that are hitting you, that's the tide, that's what's happening. But each one that's pulled out, it's going to leave a little bit of a trace, but it's no longer creating more. And that little trace, you can solve that. And once you solve it, it's over. So if you're not willing to look at yourself as suicidal, if you're not willing to heal suicide within yourself, then it's going to be an option for you behind the scenes, and that's not going to help you. So if I could give you one piece of advice for these next 3 weeks, is sit down with yourself, with your body, talk to your body about suicide. Talk to your body, talk to your spirit, talk to your soul, whatever you feel your higher self, hopefully your highest self. But if you want to do your higher self, then whatever. Just talk to yourself about suicide. Really get to know the concept. Explore it. See what it would feel like if you did commit suicide. Actually allow yourself to travel with that perspective and learn from it. Because I can pretty much guarantee everyone that's listening that you will feel worse, not better, when you actually follow that train. But as long as you believe that that is a choice, it's something that is pulling you out. We've got to come together and be in that space of wholeness. And for many of you, I know you're suffering. I know this is hard. I know that this is this time that you thought that we were going to instantly clean up. But we can't do that, because if we instantly clean up, we can instantly be dirty again. The ability to use time to solve our problems in an instant way is not going to be given back to humanity for a while. And there's a reason, because we need to understand the value of what we do in this world. This is one of the main topics I'm going to be talking about in the Wealth series, is understanding your value. Well, if I don't have value to it, it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter, it's easily changeable. And if it's easily changeable, then I'm just going to get more of the thing that I don't want. So yes, these next 3 weeks are going to be difficult because they're being cleaned up. But they're being cleaned up once and for all on a level that we can just dream of. And now we don't have to dream about it because it's happening, because we earned it. Humanity did the work and earned the higher tools. And we're going to continue to get even better tools, and we're going to get to choose to work with them or not work with them, because humanity's making the choice. This is the first time in most of y'all's lives where humanity actually had a choice, like a real choice. So celebrate that and begin the work, like the real, true work. And when you do feel those like things that knock you off center for a little bit, breathe and smile and say, awesome, another thing is no longer connected to me, and I am able to connect myself back to my own spirit, my own essence. Because all those things were taking up room and you couldn't bring yourself in when those things existed. So now you're able to fully embody. How magical is that?
So magical, Jason. A lot of people in the comment section talking about feeling suicidal and how to come up for them over the course of the last couple of days. Every time in my life, Jason, that I've had a massive shift, a quantum leap, just prior to that quantum leap, I get this premonition that I'm going to die. And it comes out of nowhere. And mostly it's not a gruesome, terrible feeling. It's just like, ah, it really looks like death is coming up.
Yep.
And so I'll explore that for a little bit. I remember being convinced. I was driving from Cape Town to Joburg. This is 1,400 kilometers. Don't ask me what that is in miles. And I was doing this long journey, and I was about 20 years old, convinced I was going to die somewhere along the journey. And I didn't. It was the weirdest thing because I held such certainty, not fear, but I had certainty that I was going to die. And I now realize that that was a marker for me of radical transformation. And I did radically transform, not just on that journey, but in the weeks that followed that journey. And it's occurred so many times for me that now I really get it. I really get that when the fear of death, or even just the exploration of death, arises, something in me knows a quantum shift is about to occur.
Yep.
And death and transformation, it really is the same thing. It's just that in transformation, we tend to keep the body, and in death, we tend to drop the body.
Exactly. Yep. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Ascension requires that you accept death. Because if you can't accept death, you can't truly live. Death is one of the greatest gifts that we have because it's an end point to something. If you had infinite time, you wouldn't have value. But because there's finite time, you're able to gain value. And value allows you to see things deeper. And that's the beauty of the journey that we're on. As we get more opportunities to embrace death, to accept it for what it is, as a necessary endpoint in existence, so that we can actually gain value, we begin to love life. We begin to understand and respect life. And when you begin to understand and respect life, it becomes miracles and magic. Kind of like that fairy we just saw earlier, like that is the norm. You begin to play with these beings. You begin to actually get to physically see them all the time because you've opened your eyes and you're putting enough value in this world that you're bringing your consciousness and awareness into this world that you begin to see through the veils. And as more and more of these beings are being pulled out and uprooted, you're going to begin to see more and more of these things because that veil is the fog I was talking about. That veil that we had to overcome, that everyone talks about as a dimensional veil, is from dimensional beings creating confusion and chaos that led to us being separate from ourselves. And we had to call them higher selves because we had to communicate between the fog. Well, that fog is lifting. You know what that does? That means we lift with it. Oh, look, we are the highest self now. So these next 3 weeks are going to be exponentially awesome for some. For others, it's going to be very difficult because you're going to find the places that are tangled into that fog that have that generator of that negative ET flooding you constantly. And when it's removed, you're not going to know what to do at first. And that's okay too. But my answer to you, if you truly want to listen to me, it's simple. Take the time necessary to bring presence back into the space where the entity once held. Because you're powerful. You have the ability to do this. You don't need me or any other facilitator to hold your hand through this. If you feel called to work with a facilitator, awesome. But it's not required. In fact, this is going to be a natural progression for all of us. Over the next 3 weeks, humanity as a whole is going to come back online. And this is going to be very drastic and very powerful. So remember that what you see is going to echo on the world stage, and that the world stage that you might understand to be true may end up not being true. And that's okay, because what is true will come. Absolute truth is coming, and there's nothing that can stop absolute truth. We have fragments of truth, no matter how good we are. It's one of my favorite quotes that I've ever said is, the truth can never be spoken, only heard in the silence. So even in this moment, I'm telling you my truth as best I can. And I try to keep it as close to the truth as I can. Like that's something that I will always dedicate myself to doing, is being as truthful as I can. But again, I'm speaking. And until we can begin to just have these sessions where we just sit there and stare at each other and share codes through presence, there's going to be my truth and Carrie's truth. And you're going to get to take your truth and look at those things and figure out a new perspective around your truth and choose whether you apply or not. But I do look forward to the day where we just sit on this live completely silent and just look at each other and everyone's just learning through that perspective. That's going to be awesome because energy doesn't lie. And that's the beauty of where we're headed. We're headed to absolute truth, which is pure energy. We're going to go to this place together. We all earned the right. We all worked hard to come to a space where we valued humanity so much so that we knew that the progression that we were on didn't fit anymore.
It's been a time marker on my calendar for quite a long time, 24th of December. And I was so present on the 24th of December. We had a beautiful day at the beach. The world felt, I don't even know what the word is. Would I say liberated, lighter? The world felt lighter on the 24th of December for me. But even though I knew that it felt lighter for me, I held the awareness that there was a pending but necessary chaos.
Yep.
And when I talk about a pending but necessary chaos, that doesn't mean it's going to be your chaos or mine or the people listening. But I do sense that we're going to be seeing that in the collective. And when we do see that necessary chaos, which is really just the unraveling, it's the final unraveling, it does look chaotic. For those who've been in resistance to what is, it is supremely difficult.
Yep.
Those who are here listening, even on the replay, just because you're here, you're probably of the energetic awareness that doesn't keep you in that level of chaos. So be mindful when you do see that chaos, that it doesn't have to be yours just because you're aware of it. Just because you see it in the world around you, that doesn't mean you have to take it in, because I feel like we're so empathic. Those of us that are walking this journey of consciousness, we feel things. We can't see it and not feel it. And when we do, and we start to really take in the stuff that we're aware of outside of us, it can totally destabilize us.
Yep.
So this is the time. This is the time. You call it presence, centeredness, stability, however you want to describe it. These are the most powerful tools that we can employ right now.
Yep.
And I know, so many of us, we fall prey to self-doubt and the uncertainty. So then we turn to others and question others, because the idea is that others are going to give us the stability.
Yep.
And it's okay. It's okay to get those little moments where you might need stability, but for as much as you can, know that the real stability you crave right now is your own. That's the stuff that's going to move you through this and allow this to be the most beautiful, lightest time that you're yet to experience on this planet. This is celebratory.
Yeah.
And it's allowed to be, even though there might be chaos going on out there, it's okay for us to be in lightness. We don't have to share in that chaos.
Exactly. Yeah. So, first of all, the past was you would take on other people's issues and solve them yourself so that they could then be solved, right? That's not the future. That's not how we as humanity work. It's actually the opposite. We've been taught that's how we work. We should take on other people's problems and solve them for them. But we're actually here to solve our own problems and to help others solve their problems by being an example. So, for those of you that are used to taking on the world's problems and trying to solve them, that's not for you to do anymore. Your job is to solve your own problems. And then if the world comes to you for support, then that's cool, you can do that. But the time of fixing other things so that you don't have to fix yourself is over. And now we're here at a point where it's time for us to fix ourselves. And again, this is the year of redemption for humanity. It started on the 23rd, which was 3 days ago, and it's been amazing so far. So now that we're in this year of redemption, it's not about humanity redeeming itself as a whole as much as it's humanity being cultivated within ourselves, and that brings humanity back online. So what does it mean to be human? And I can't answer that for you. That's something you get to answer for yourself. What does it mean to be human? Does it mean that you're stressed? Does it mean that you're afraid? Does it mean that you're disconnected from God? Does it mean all of these things? It could for you in this moment, and there's nothing wrong with that. It could also mean that you have empathy. It could also mean that you have a love that you didn't know you could love at. It could also mean that you have a capability to integrate soul and spirit as one and become whole. You see, we get to define what humanity means to each of us, and then we get to define what it looks like for us to be human. But that's our next stage. And then a little bit back on the T system, because it's kind of important. Tier 1 has always been a cleanup. Tier 2 has always been whenever the sharing begins. And Tier 3 has always been the teaching. Any planet that goes under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Federation always goes through those three systems. Traditionally, the class of the cleanup is roughly about 100 years. We're doing it in 3 weeks. The reason is because this isn't the first time Earth has gone through a cleanup. This is only 9,000 years. It's not billions of years. So that's kind of an important thing to be aware of. So what most planets go through, that drastic level of awakening, they have it over a long period of time. We don't. So the sharing, though, the sharing is going to be interesting because I think that's going to take about a year. And then the teaching. So sharing is the most important step, in my opinion, because sharing is like, this is what's available, this is what's possible. Now go figure out how to get there. Because once you have an example, you can do anything. The teaching is once those examples have been formed and we then are able to work on those things, then they come in and help us understand what we don't understand so that we can bridge the gap. And usually whenever a teaching occurs, we jump about 1,000 years in a single year when it comes to evolutionary potential and possibility. So the sharing is huge because it gives us an opportunity. And that can take years as well. We'll have to see how it all goes. But I still think that this is one of the reasons why we're coming into the year of fifth dimensional technological revolution, right? Is because when we go into that, and that's 2023 for those of you that don't know, for us to go from where we are now to a fifth dimensional technological revolution in such a short amount of time, realistically, that's not possible with what we currently have access to. But now that we're getting this support and that we're going to be coming into this space, I mean, like, yeah, like, definitely, totally possible. In fact, everything is now possible, which is an incredible thing. So as we continue to move forward, more and more and more and more and more in what we're doing in this world, we're going to continue to understand how this dream that we've collectively dreamed together can become possible. It's kind of like, I don't know, like maybe 10 years ago, I was talking about 2021 being world peace, and everyone was like, there's no way, it's not possible. And then they look back at like this last year and the fact that they survived it, they're like, there's no way, it's not possible. And the amount of changes that has occurred in a single year, people are starting to go, actually, you know, it might be possible. We'll have to see. Because we can't fathom what is possible when we actually have the value that we're going to have with time. We literally can't imagine the depth of each second and what can be learned and gained in those seconds when we're fully present. But we're about to get to discover that. We're about to get to understand what that feels like. And instead of us being confused and brainwashed into something else, those things that did those things are leaving. It means you're going to hear yourself for the first time, clear as a bell. And when you have you guiding you, what you can do is insane. So be prepared for what comes next, because it is going to be a little unstable for many people on this planet. And our job, as people who've gone through this instability and done the work within ourselves, is to hold compassion, to send love to these people, to not judge them as less than or weaker, but rather hold space for them in their process. Because they're going to go through it, and they're not going to understand why they're going through it. They're not going to get this thing with this ET thing. They probably don't even know that negative ETs are a thing. And as they're being ripped out, people are starting to go insane because they don't understand who they are anymore in this world, because their sense of identity was wrapped up in those beings without even knowing they existed. So imagine how difficult that would be to comprehend or understand. Give yourself a moment to feel what it feels to be ignorant and not to know that even this world could exist. The majority of people in this world don't even know that energy is a thing. Even though it's scientifically documented and proven now, people don't know that it's a thing. Their narrative, the way that they believe this world to be, is so small in comparison. And they're about to be shown the grand vision. What does that look like? For most people, that looks like hiding in their closet because everything they understood is gone and they don't know where to take their first step. So there's never been a greater time to be the lighthouse to the lost than this moment. And I encourage everyone to step forward into the world, not as superior, but as an example. And not as an example of hate or fear or rage, but as an example of love and truth. That's my call to action. That's what these 3 weeks are for me personally. I really want the world to understand that there's a better way and that there's a choice that needs to be made. So it's one of the reasons why we did this really quick one, is because it was really important to have this conversation today.
Jason, I know people are going to ask the question, and I haven't kept my eye on the comments the whole way, so maybe it's been asked already and I've missed it. But the question that I want to ask, just because I know it's going to come up, is, so negative ETs is a thing. There are people who are going to go, I never knew that that was possible, that negative ETs could even exist, because surely a more technologically advanced race would have moved beyond duality. So what's up with negative ETs? How does that exist? How is that possible that we have such a thing as negative ETs?
Well, you just said it properly. You said a more technological society. When we begin to think that technology is greater than ourselves, instead of using technology as a tool, we stop evolving and start evolving our technology instead of ourselves. And it leads to an artificial superiority. These beings that are brainwashing and confusing and things, they believe they're doing what's right because they've lost their way. And we came here actually to help them. We also came here to help those that got lost along the journey. But we came here knowing what we were up against before we got here. Obviously, when we got here, we forgot everything because that field memory wipes you. So you come here and you're like, I don't remember anything. Oh, I should probably scream now because I'm going to cry because I'm in a body and my language isn't translating and I don't understand why they're not listening to me telepathically anymore. And so it gets really awkward because over time you then remember less and less and less and less and less. You see, that's going away as more and more of these holes have been poked through. Even the kids these days, they're super telepathic. They're incredible. Kids these days are just off the charts, crazy, awesome. Humanity as a whole is redeeming itself because we're coming back online. These negative ETs, through this process, they're going to be uprooted, but they don't know that what they were doing was hurting us. They actually thought they were helping us. And again, it comes into the point where you rely on technology more than yourself. It's okay to use tools and technology. I think that those are incredible. I think they're great gifts. Like, for instance, the wheel. Wow, can you imagine how far behind we would be if we didn't have that thing? So, it's important. Fire, another great example. We needed those things so that we could go further. But it's always important to self-source and then work with tools. Self-source and then work with tools. Because otherwise, we become technologically advanced but not spiritually advanced. And that's the difference. It's one of the reasons why that influx that we just had, the divine intelligence influx is the first one, was a huge life-changing event for the world. Because when the divine intelligence comes online, that's the connection of the divine and the intelligence, not just the intelligence, which mostly is tools, right? How to work with tools? Yeah, but how to work with yourself and how to work with tools? We haven't really had that. And now that we are starting to have that, things are getting really, really, really awesome on this planet. Speaking of awesome, the next set of universal energy centers comes online next month as well, which is sacred fire. So it's perfect timing to burn out and to clean out all of the stuff that's going to be coming up for us. And we'll be working with that. I'm actually going to be recording the next sound sequence pretty soon, and it's the final sound sequence. So it's going to cover all of the universal energy centers, even though the last one isn't unlocked yet, which is actually home. So that's going to be really awesome. I can't wait for that. And that's where we're headed. And I'm hoping that we'll be finished with home by around the 18th of February, but it could be a little bit like the 21st, 27th. We'll have to see how it all goes and how humanity handles. Some major turning points are about to come up. January 6th is one of the largest turning points in humanity. I'm not entirely sure why. all I see is that like there's a drastic two-choice system here, and humanity hasn't made the choice yet. But I think that as these ETs are being cleaned up, that a choice point will be made and we'll choose correctly. Again, it's humanity making the choice, so there's no leaders choosing. So everything's kind of unknown, it's up in the air. But as more clarity comes in, I have a feeling humanity will make the right choice. And if they make the wrong choice, they made the right choice, and we're just going to go a different route for a little bit. But we'll eventually get back to the center, so it doesn't matter. But we'll make the right choice because we're humanity, and when we're clear, we know what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have faith. I have faith in humanity. I really do. Jason, I don't even know when it was a couple of weeks ago. I did a video called The Anunnaki Say Goodbye to Humanity. And it was about the group of negative ETs at the head honcho level, for want of a better word, eventually saying, you know what, humanity, we need a divorce. Our time is done. But that group of beings that said goodbye to humanity, I'll link that video for you in the comments somewhere below. But that video shed light on the idea that there were still those minions, as I called them. There were still those that were going to be running around a little bit like headless chickens because they didn't have the direction of what was once their leaders. So they were, in essence, leaderless. And I feel like there's this huge relief on all sides. The relief for us is, humanity has our space back again. And we can only move into our beautiful power from here on out. So there's the relief for humanity, but the relief for the negative ones is just as big. And as I speak about the relief for the negative ones, I know that there are those people, and perhaps some of the people are going to listen on the replay and go, but how can there be compassion for the negative ones? Shouldn't there be punishment for the negative ones? I mean, I'll ask you to share in a moment, but Jason, from my perspective, those negative ones, if we do hold the need for punishment and retribution, we'll put ourselves back, I don't know how many years, if that's what we're going to go for. If we're going to go for that over forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean I condone what you did. Forgiveness is the acceptance, the ultimate acceptance that this is what is. The time for punishment and making them out to be wrong so that we can be more right, I don't feel like we need to go into any of that. Do you?
No. So first of all, I don't think they did anything wrong. They did the best they could with what they knew. And we've all been guilty of that at some point in our lives. Like anyone out there who's watching, if you can literally think of no time where you acted improperly with the best wisdom you had, then you really need to take a deeper look. Because at some point in life, on this planet, you've been misled or misunderstood something. It's happened. Welcome to Earth, especially Earth in a third dimensional reality. Like, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. So I can't look at them and say, oh, they're evil, they're darkness incarnate, they're such horrible beings, because they played a role. Without their force pushing on me, I would never be as strong as I am today. Does that mean that I needed that force? I don't know. And it's not for me to know that. Really, all that I know is that I made it through the time where I did need that force because I don't need it anymore, and now they're going. So I'm guessing I needed that force because otherwise would I be who I am? And I don't think I would. So all I have is love, honestly. Even for these beings that are being pulled out, they've been stuck in this density for so long and playing the same role over and over again. I mean, 9,000 years for most of these beings is a really long time to be stuck in a density and not being able to connect or commune with the beings that they used to be able to connect and commune with, because this has been a mission for them. And their leaders left them a long time ago. I mean, that was shut down when the magnetic field around the Earth was formed on purpose, specifically so that nothing else could come in. That changed everything. You can thank the pyramids and many other things for that. But building that energetic field so that this planet wouldn't be interfered with anymore except what was in here and the things that were willing to incarnate in was a pretty big deal. And many of these beings have been stuck here because they couldn't get out before the field came up. It was kind of one of those overnight operations where everything was done behind the scenes and then boom, done at once. And then they were like, wait, no, I wanted to, okay. And then they started seeking out people. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to sacred sites and negative ETs were like, hey, can you just send me out of here? I don't want to be here anymore. The energy's getting brighter every day. I just want to go home. And I've listened to those beings. I've been like, hey, yeah, man, I can help you get on the other side of this field because I understand you don't want to be here. And that would suck if that was me. So I would hate to be stuck. And so
Yeah.
when you look at it from their perspective, they were doing what they came to do. And many of them got stuck. And then they got resentful because they got stuck. And so, yeah, they started acting out a little bit. But how many of us haven't acted out before? I've acted out before. I've been triggered. Why do I expect them to be better than me? Especially considering that I'm supposed to be more evolved than them according to most people. I'm not more evolved than them. I'm just at a different game than they are. They're not bad things. They're just things that got stuck somewhere along their journey. And now that they get to go home, they're going to get to grow too. And ultimately, as humanity, like our truest value is our compassion, our ability to say, hey, congratulations on the job well done. Go home, get to clean up, have fun. And if you want to incarnate as a human one of these days, we can be friends. But can we get there overnight? Probably not. It's going to take us a while to accept the things that have been told to us. It's going to take us a while to let go of the lies and the illusion and the confusion. It's going to let us, that trauma is going to be there. And there's no one that's going to come in that's going to wipe that trauma clear. That's not what they're going to do. I mean, like a truly highly evolved being will hold space for you to heal your trauma, but they're not going to fix it for you. Because if they fix it for you, that's just limiting you, that's weakening you. And so this need to make something small so that you can be big is an old and outdated game. This need to have things punished, another old and outdated game. I truly believe that the value of punishment is kind of coming to an end. Does that mean that we shouldn't hold people accountable? No, we definitely should hold people accountable. So, for instance, if I don't like something you're doing and I don't tell you that I don't like what you're doing, that's not going to help you see that I don't like what you're doing. Now, for me to tell you that what you're doing is wrong is a whole nother thing, right? Because that is to judge and to diminish what you're doing. I don't know whether it's wrong or right for you. I know whether it's wrong or right for me. So if I don't like what you're doing and I don't say something, then I can't hold you accountable to a place where you can actually look at what you're doing. And you might say, yeah, I can see what I'm doing and I don't feel good about it either now. Or you might say, actually, what I'm doing is completely fine. And then I would have the right to say, awesome, continue to go forth and do that thing, just not around me. Because I get to control what I choose and don't choose. That's the power of being human. We get to choose what we want. But if we don't tell people what we want, how do we ever expect them to know what we want? Oh, because they're telepathic, right? Yeah, so am I. We're all telepathic. Awesome. Do you realize that we're at infancy when it comes to telepathic abilities? Most of us don't remember that we know that we can capably understand you. And it's going to be a little bit before we turn that one back on. So to think that other people are just going to get you right off the bat, yes, in other planets that would be true. Here, not so much yet. Will it be true in the future? Absolutely. In the future, you will be able to come into space and know things instantly. And it's going to be glorious and grand. We're not there. And if you're there, congratulations. You're an example. Good job. But the person you're talking to might not be there. So don't think that they're there and then get mad at them for not being there because you're there. It doesn't work. So remember, as we move forward as a race, compassion is imperative to the journey ahead. So is empathy. People have gone through something very real for them. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's a thing. And how that thing happened is also not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. Let go of the need to be right or vindictive. If you can let go of those things, you'll find your life is so much more freeing. There is so much going on in this world that needs to be forgiven. Start with yourself.
Jason, looking in at the comment section, moments ago you were talking about power the power of humanity, of each one of us. And there's a question here from M. Olnova. And the question is, what about the negative ships and bases that are off planet? What would you say, Jason?
It's not really relevant to our game right now. It will be handled in the future, just like everything does in the cosmos. It all evolves and moves forward. But this universe isn't transiting out of having a third dimensional plane. I mean, Mars just became the new third dimensional planet. So there's still games to be had there. The coolest part about the Galactic Federation is it's a force for good in the universe. And when I say good, I'm not referring to good and evil. I'm referring to the value of spirituality, the overall goodness of us, that innate ability. And they've collected the biggest armada ever. I mean, literally, the reason that Earth is part of it now is because our Space Force has joined their Space Force. And it's not a force for war. It's a peacekeeping force. They literally don't have to do anything because they're so big and they're so connected. And as that field washes over and peace becomes in the universe, eventually even Mars and the new colonies and things that are working on over there are going to get supported and stabilized. And then the entire galaxy, as we understand it, and basically the entire universe, will level up. And the third dimension will no longer be necessary. And then a third dimensional game will be created in an omniverse, another verse outside of this one. And from time to time, we'll go visit that Earth. Or that world, rather, not Earth necessarily. Could be. Earth was a really good job, though, like the template of it. So they might reuse the template multiple times in other universes. We don't know. And also, to be honest with you, that's probably not even relevant to humanity right now. So, long story short, there are negative ET bases all over the universe. And they have their world and we have ours, and we're under jurisdiction now, which means there's a field that's coming, but obviously they have to get them out first and get them to where they need to go, because otherwise if they put up this field around us, that would really not be good for them, because then they're just trapped between two things, and then they're not on Earth, but they're not also home, and so that's just, yeah, that's mean. And for some people, they're like, yeah, well, they deserve that. No, they don't. They just did what they could do as best they could do it, and yeah, they didn't have all the tools. They didn't know they didn't have all the tools. They did the best. I wish them well on their journey home. And I'm grateful that they're choosing to leave. Because they are. I mean, they're being pulled out, but they're also so dense that they don't realize that they're being pulled out. So they're coming out into our world and they're like, oh, I remember everything. Oh, okay. And then they're like, yeah, I'm ready to go home. So that half second that I was talking about is all it's taking for them to realize that they're done. There's not a war. It's not a hostile takeover of the planet or anything crazy. These beings are coming into full realization and going, oh, I was supposed to be done a few thousand years ago. I didn't realize. I didn't get the memo. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm going to go home. So it's not this fear thing that people might have. I really want to point that out. This is them choosing to leave once they're removed from the space they've been stuck in. So they're realizing that they wanted to go home. I don't think, so far anyway, in the records I've looked at, none of them have gone to war or tried to fight for that. So I have faith that even the beings in human bodies that are in negative status are going to come into positive status once the fog clears and they're able to see. Because when humanity is given a true choice, when they're actually saying, hey, you can see clearly, what are you going to do? Humanity has always done the right thing. Seriously, always. So why would this be any different?
Yeah. The power of humanity is the most beautiful thing. It's beautiful. We hear the word power and we think of a bulldozer so often, like power's got to be this force that overrides, instead of the understanding that power can just be this magnificent beauty, this magnificent presence. And we haven't known it for so long. So we've constantly been under who's in charge of us now kind of a mindset, oh, these group of beings, oh, the off-planet bases, oh, they'll just control us from there, or whatever it is. The concept of having controllers has been kind of so deeply woven into our psyche that the very concept of sovereignty and what that feels like and what it means to each one of us, it is so new.
Yeah.
And it becomes more tangible by the day. So even those of us who are listening right now going, oh, I know what sovereignty is. Wait until 2 hours time. Wait until 2 days time. and feel it again. And you'll notice that you're going, oh, is this what else sovereignty is? Is this what else my power looks like?
Yeah.
Because that's growing on a daily basis.
Yep.
So we are truly living in a remarkable, beautiful period. Jason, can I go back to another question? Have you got time for one more question
Yeah, I
before we
do.
go?
But before we go to that one question, I just want to say something.
Yeah.
For those of you that know what sovereignty is, try to understand it.
What did you say? Try to?
For those who know what sovereignty is, try to understand it. Because that's the knee-jerk reaction of the ego mind to say, I know that. Congratulations, but you haven't embodied it, so you don't understand it. So really ask yourself, do I understand sovereignty? And then 3 hours later, do I understand sovereignty? Because to truly understand something is to acknowledge that it's always ever evolving and expanding, and that there's no point of reference that will always be perfect. Just like the universe moves around, so does our consciousness.
Yeah. It's thrilling. It's every day is an exciting day because we're discovering things that we think are static but are always evolving. The question now, I can't see it. Jason, oh, here we go. Divine Matrix asks, I'm wondering about the physical implants put there by negative ETs. How can they be resolved? Are they also entities themselves?
Ooh, that's a good question, actually. So yes, and yes. And they will also be resolved naturally. But here's the thing. When something is holding something in place, it's really hard to remove. It requires a great force to remove it. So for many people, negative ET implants was very hard to remove because they couldn't reach a level of power within themselves that was more powerful than the power they'd given these ETs over all the lifetimes that they lived. And so these implants would be stuck in us and they would cause a misfire or a misunderstanding around something. And so we would hear a word and we would hear the opposite of that word. And that is a real thing that does exist. And many people have them all over. The coolest part is when there's no power given to those things anymore, because the thing that's reinforcing it doesn't exist anymore in the field that you once had, it kind of just dissolved naturally. So the coolest part about where we're headed is all those negative implants that people have are going to start to dissolve and malfunction and be removed. And yeah, you can remove them early if you want, and I highly recommend it because every second of clarity is worth it, in my opinion. But if you choose not to, and your body makes it through this next journey, then all those implants are going to go away. And again, just for the record, those implants were put in by your authority in them believing it to be better than your own authority. And so there is lessons to be learned there. And this letting go of these implants in that process of actually doing it yourself before it happens naturally can be a very powerful way to come into new levels of alignment.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure, Divine Matrix. Such a beautiful message from you. Thank you so, so much. Amazing conversation, says Jenny Ranko. I agree with you, Jenny. Thank you so very, very much to everybody who's been with us, 250 people on the live stream. So thank you so much to all of you. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Since I am no longer on Facebook, please do subscribe here. This is where you'll find me and my upcoming videos. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Kerry K. So find me here, ring the bell, do what you need to do. And there will be lots of information coming through from the Galactics. See, Jason, you spoke about in the beginning, you spoke about the Galactic Federation of Light.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody asked me very recently on my Telegram community, what's the deal? Is it the Galactic Fed or the Galactic Federation of Light? And I said, look, maybe it's a South African thing, but we don't do long titles. We shorten everything.
Yep.
So I've only ever said the Galactic Federation. I still say the Galactic Federation, but most of the time I just say the Galactics because that's, to me, who they are. So I'm chatting to the Galactics, remembering, though, that we are also galactic, remembering that too, that there is a galactic self within each one of us. So not to create a hierarchy, not to create a worshipping, but just to create the awareness that whether you call them the Galactic Federation or, plain old the Galactics, it doesn't take away from your galactic presence. That's something that each one of us gets to claim as well.
Yeah, and at some level, every one of you is part of the Galactic Federation. It's just part of it because, like, the Federation just means all the things unified. So the Galactic Federation, the reason it's called that is it's literally a space force that is a force for good in the universe, and we all come from different missions on that journey to bring the universe into goodness, to bring truth back into the whole universe. That's all their mission is, really. And so to keep peace is to simply be that force of goodness and that example. I'm really looking forward to the day that they begin to work physically on this planet instead of non-physically. Because right now they're
So
helping
agree.
non-physically. Like you're not gonna go outside and see a ship landing and there's like ripping this being from a dimension and holding him in the space and being like, hey, how do you feel? And they'll be like, oh, actually, no, I remember now. I'm gonna go home. You're not gonna get to see that unless you have dimensional sight, in which case it can be really weird being outside right now. But that being said, for the average person, it's not going to be trillions of spaceships just laying down on the earth, like ripping things through dimensions in front of you and waving at you. Like that's probably not going to happen for most people. It would be probably too much, to be honest, for everyone. Like even for me, I've actually seen UFOs land and I've seen the whole process. But like watching an extraterrestrial being land in front of me, get out of the ship, reach into another dimension, and pull a being out of that dimension, the amount of processing that would require, just the amount of data alone that would come from that single experience, I think it would fry me. Like it would probably short circuit me, to be honest. And I've done a lot of work, so I don't think the average human being is ready for that. Which is again why they even said like the news has actually spoken of the Galactic Federation, which is really cool. I'm a big fan. Anytime that mainstream media speaks about aliens in a positive way, and the fact that they actually mentioned it by name is probably one of the biggest things that happened this year. I mean, even people that I talk to that didn't believe in aliens now do. They're like, "Oh yeah, I know aliens are a thing," and I'm like, "And you're not saying anything. You used to hate me for saying aliens existed," and they were like, "Yeah, but I don't anymore." I'm like,
Yeah, I know, right? I
"Help me
know. It hurts
understand."
the
They're like,
brain.
aliens aren't really that important because we have this pandemic and the other things going on, and so that's what I'm focused on. I'm like, oh, okay, but life exists on other planets and it's intelligent, right? That's what matters. And they're like, yeah, it's a thing, but it doesn't matter because it's not important right now. And I'm like, the biggest discovery in the entire history of the world happened, and no one's saying anything about it. Like they're not like this is not the news of the century, which it should be. Like it literally like this changes everything. But people are just like, yeah, whatever. Just kind of like when they released the Tesla papers and they said that Tesla was an alien and they acknowledged it on page 4, I think it was. And people were just like, yeah, well, it's not a big deal. It's like Nikola Tesla being an alien is a very big deal. First of all, it acknowledged aliens exist. Second of all, it's one of the greatest minds of our like world for a long time. So that's a big deal. And they're like, nah, not really. It's like, okay, fine. You know, whatever. Aliens are real. We can acknowledge that. That's good. Galactic Federation's a thing. Yeah, but everyone knew that anyway. No, they didn't. They didn't know that. They've been saying it's not true for. But yeah, that's just me and my journey of like
I share
wanting
that
people
journey
to
with
just
you.
take a second and realize, like, hey guys, the world has literally changed this year on levels that we don't even understand. But the fact that they can acknowledge that aliens are real. And not only that they're real, they even acknowledge that we weren't enlightened enough, so to speak. We weren't evolved enough for them to work with us directly yet. That's a big statement. So, yeah, if you don't know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, Google Galactic Federation in the US and enjoy the ride that you're about to go on. More and more aliens are being talked about, which means that we're getting closer and closer to the point where they're not only talked about, but they're talked with. And this is going to be a beautiful time these next few years as we begin to work with these things that we can't even imagine working with. That's going to derail literally the value that we can dream, because we dream at this level and we're like, yeah, this is everything, this ceiling here, and they dream with no ceiling. They're like, wait, why do you guys use a ceiling? And we aren't going to be using a ceiling much longer because that fog of the negative ETs is going to be gone. There's no ceiling anymore. So imagine what you can do. Now, for those of you that haven't seen this movie, just because I love to recommend movies, Interstellar, go watch it. Go watch it. Just trust me. It's one of those movies that will change your life forever in the most beautiful and amazing way. But
Yeah.
seriously, Galactic Federation was talked about in the news,
Mm,
for the record.
mm,
That's the biggest highlight for 2020 for me.
yeah. Jason, I share that frustration, exasperation that you describe, because that was me in the 80s. Okay. I was the geek at school talking about aliens being laughed at and called a conspiracy theorist
Yep.
in the 80s. In 2016, there was a headline that said aliens are real. Nobody batted an eyelid.
Yep.
And it just soaked into mainstream consciousness without anybody having a hoo ha. And I kind of love that it happened that way because it's prepared me that we're coming up, all of us, for a time when our loved ones, who many of us have argued with and said, no, you got to believe me. The world is this way. This is what's happening. And they've argued and they said, you're a conspiracy theorist or you don't know what you're talking about. There's coming a time when those loved ones and family members are going to go, yeah, I always knew that that was right. I always knew that your opinion and the things that you've believed were exactly.
Yep.
Oh, I was just kidding you, or oh, I wasn't serious about that, or whatever.
Or they
It
won't
is
even remember
so,
that they used to believe another way.
I know, I know.
It's really annoying when
And
that
then so
happens.
many,
Because you're like, oh yeah, so you always thought aliens were real, even though you tortured me for it. Okay, yeah, cool. That's awesome. I'm glad that you knew that this whole time. Because
yeah,
our memory is going to be different than many of the other people's memory because timeline integration, which is always a fun concept. When you have all of these different timelines merging as one timeline and all these different parallel realities that played out, and you remember one reality and they remember another reality, you get to go, okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that in this reality that never happened. I can forgive that in my reality it did, and I can move forward with this. But the main thing, the coolest part, is that people now acknowledge aliens are real. And I think that that is something that's been overstepped. And I just feel like we should probably take a moment, go back to that moment, and just, as a group, just celebrate the fact that after years and years and years of hard work and dedication and working with these beings for many of us, we can now have open conversations about it. And it actually, people are just like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, what a world that we live in where an open conversation about the Galactic Federation is no longer seen as like, oh, okay, well, it's crazy or ooh, or anything like that. I mean, me and Carrie actually got in a lot of trouble. We did a talk about Galactic Federation a while back, and so many people unfollowed us and got angry at us because we dared to talk about it. There was even a database in another timeline that talked about and like categorized everything about the evilness of it and the illusion of it and the misunderstanding of it and everything. And so it's fascinating to see what happens as the different worlds come in together and all of these things start to show up because there's these incongruencies and they do smooth out eventually. But until they smooth out, it's always hilarious. At this point in my life, I actually just laugh. I laugh. I'm like, all right, cool. So that's what happened for you. All right, awesome. Noted. Because that's not what happened for me, but it doesn't matter what happened for me. It matters how I handle what happened for them. And if they don't remember something, I can easily let it go very fast because there's no one holding it anymore. Kind of like those implants that are in people's bodies and minds. When nothing's holding it in place anymore, it never happened. One of the statements I use in the organization all the time is when something is complete, it never was. So when the game is
yeah,
completed, it never existed because there's no mention, there's no space, there's nothing to hold it. It just disappears. So whenever a game is only being held on one side of the equation, and that side says, never mind, I can forget that, I can let that go, the game disappears. And so the memory of the game can also disappear, which is one of the reasons why I don't have a lot of memories of life, is because every time that I complete a day, I do my best to uncreate everything from that day and let it go so that I can step fully into the next day. And I've shared that prayer with you guys a few times, so you know what I'm talking about. But the journey forward is to walk without footprints. And if you're heavy because of something that happened in the past, you're creating footprints. So forgive the world for its ignorance, let go of your own ignorance, and move forward freely. We've earned it.
and while you're at it, let go of the need to be right.
Yep.
or acknowledged as knowing something when the rest of the world didn't, because chances are you're not going to have that moment of going, you see, I knew it all along. Chances
Yeah.
are everybody's going to look at you and go, duh, we all knew that.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, we can let that one go.
You don't need to
Jason,
be
is
one that changed the world. You just need to be in the world that changed.
ah, such a good Jason quote that was. There's a very good question here. And I like ironing out these questions because when they're not, people often reach some interesting conclusions of their own. So here's, it's not really a question, it's a comment. And it says, there's a difference between acting out. So remember earlier you spoke about how the negative ETs were acting out. There's a difference between acting out and doing horrendous things.
Is there though? I mean, I would
Yeah,
actually argue that there isn't really a difference,
yeah,
because if you don't know what you're doing,
yeah.
how can you do better?
Mm,
It's kind of like,
mm,
I always take this as an example, and people, this will get me unfollowed really fast, but I look at life from this perspective, and I think it's one of the most important perspectives that you can have. Can I see a reality where I was the person that pulled the lever at Auschwitz and killed people? Can I see a reality? Absolutely, I can. I can see a reality where I did that, because I don't know how the person who did that did that. And as long as that is the case, I can see reality where I can do that. Does that mean with the choices and actions I've taken in this life that I ever would? Absolutely not. But it would be utter stupidity for me personally to say that there's not a reality where I can do that. Because when given the same choices and actions that led to that other person, I don't know what I would choose. I don't know what that person went through. I don't know anything about that. So for me to judge their journey as horrendous doesn't work for me. So acting out is acting as best we can with what we have. And I don't know any better because I'm not that being. But the moment that I know better and I choose not to, yeah, that could be horrendous. But who's to say they knew better? Because I can't say they did. And so that's where my struggle comes in. So if you believe that there is nothing in this world or any other world that could get you to pull that lever at Auschwitz, then you get to process what that means for you. Because we don't know
mm.
how influences and forces, we don't know the levels of manipulation, we don't know anything that those people went through. And you see, that's where empathy comes in, that's where forgiveness comes in, is because I can empathize with these beings. I can. I can't imagine what it would be like to be told one thing, completely experience another thing, be stuck then in that experience, and then do the best they can without any guidance or leadership. They had less of a connection to source than we did. And they were already a lower evolutionary being than we were. Like, what would you do? I don't know what I would do. So I'm not about to judge what someone else would do. And I'm not saying that you're judging them, for the record. So if this comes off as me trying to preach, I'm not. I'm just saying, for me personally, that question is always what keeps me humble, is could I pull that lever if the same things and the same coincidences, the same choices and the same actions, same influences happened? And the answer is always going to be, yeah, I could, because I don't know what they went through. That has been one of the hardest journeys this year for me. It's been learning to forgive unconditionally, because ignorance is a thing and influence is a thing. And I can't imagine either of those things in someone else's shoes. I can only understand what I would understand. And that in itself is already going to make whatever they understand different, which isn't fair to me. And for me personally, I love that one rule, the golden rule that everyone says, treat others as you would like to be treated. I wouldn't want to be judged. So I'm not going to judge others. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't judge others, because a few people on this live probably have had the conversation with me. I started out like, I'm judging you right now, and I don't want to, but I don't know any better. So help me to understand what you're coming from. Because if I can come and I can immediately say, look, I'm not whole and perfect and complete, I'm judging you. I don't want to. Immediately an opening occurs where you go, wow, so you don't want to judge me and you want to understand my side of this. And then we can have a conversation. But if I'm not willing to step forward in truth and say, hey, I'm judging you right now, then where are we going to come from? A hidden judgment? That's going to end well. especially now. So it's really about this process of acknowledgement that, hey, there are flaws in me and I understand that and I want to understand it better. So show me your point of view, because I don't need to judge your point of view, but I don't know how not to. That's acknowledging our own humility, our own ignorance. So a few people on this live have had that conversation with me. So you know that I'm not joking when I say that. It's awkward. It really is, to come up to somebody that you don't know that well and be like, I'm judging you. I don't want to though. Please just like help me understand. And sometimes those people are like, well, you're judging me, so I don't want to talk to you. And you're like, okay, cool. I tried. I did what I could do, the best I could with what I had available. And so I find it works really well for good communication though. Because if you can express that you're not seeing something in alignment or proper, and you express it from that truth, then people are more apt to actually express and share openly with you too. But you got to be the one that takes your defensives down and steps out if you're gonna ever have those clearing conversations that change the world.
Yeah. Monica Ramirez says it perfectly. Being vulnerable is so scary. Yeah, it is, but it's also where we find,
scary.
Yeah, it's where you find the essence of who you are, though. That's the you without defenses. That's the you without any walls between yourself and that which is true.
Yep.
So the vulnerable self, I know it's gut-wrenchingly raw to get in there, but it's such a beautiful place. You will never be more you than when you're in your vulnerability. That's the essence of who you are, when you can find yourself there. And so often people say, I really want to know who I am. Like, I really want to connect to the core essence of me. Then go be vulnerable and you'll do exactly that. So thank you for addressing that question, because I think that was a really, really important one about acting out versus things that are horrendous. Things that are horrendous have occurred on this planet, under our noses, in this lifetime. And
Absolutely.
we do not have to agree with them, nor do we have to condone them, but at some point, the decision will be presented to each one of us. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to forgive it, knowing that forgiveness means acceptance, not condoning?
Yep.
Or do you want to get angry with it? And that's a personal journey for each person to walk.
Absolutely.
But that will come up. All I can say to you is traumatized people traumatize people.
Yep. That's how it works.
So,
I don't think that someone that is not broken would ever break another.
oh yeah. Yeah.
And since we're all broken, we've all broken others.
Yeah.
We even have a word on this planet called breaking someone's heart. I mean, come on, like actually think about that. If you're capable of breaking someone's heart, that's a crazy concept. The heart, the most important organ of the body, pretty much, arguably. I mean, like the brain's pretty important too, but ultimately, and people break people's brains too. They're proud of it even. Like, I broke that person's brain. I gave them something they couldn't handle. It's like, why would you do that? So this is a thing. It's a thing that we get to look at. But humanity is broken in its brokenness. It's perfect in its brokenness too, because that's how we heal. And when broken people get with other broken people, they have two choices. They can heal or they can break each other. That's it. You only get two choices. If you heal, it means you're willing to look at your brokenness and the reflection of their brokenness and actually begin to piece yourself back together. And that helps them piece themselves back together. If you break each other, then you just get aggressive with each other. You point out each other's flaws instead of working on yourself. And humanity gets to make that choice. There's going to be a lot of truth coming out in these next few weeks, a lot of things coming to the surface that is going to be pretty hard for many people to process. Because when that last little fog thing dissipates and you can see the picture clearly, many people are going to have had it wrong. And they're not going to understand why they had it wrong and how they could be misled in so many levels. It's okay to have been misled, because you're not misled anymore if you can acknowledge it. That's how you walk the path of truth, is to have been misled and to acknowledge it. We're all lost until we find home. And none of us have found home at 100% yet. We've experienced home. We've begun to create home, but we're not home yet. We're experiencing it from time to time. Eventually we will live. We will live in home. And that's why I believe world peace and the world changing is where we're headed, because home is an incredible place, and it's something that we get to build here together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There are some beautiful questions coming in, but Jason, we've been going for a little while, and I kind of feel that we might need to cut it off here, and maybe we could look at the questions another day. How
I
much?
don't I have infinite time, but I know that it's late where you are. So if you feel like you want to close, we can. Or if you feel like some of those questions are really important, I'm fine to answer them as well.
Okay, there's two questions that I feel are kind of important, and
Okay.
it's past midnight for me, so my vocabulary is not what it should be, but you just bear with me. This is my tired self, but I can do this. There's a question here from M, and the question is, what will happen to humans that are tied into hybrids and ships with the negative ETs when the cleanup is done? There is some overlapping there that I don't understand. There are many tied into ships and hybrids.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a lot of things. There's the seed race on this planet. So for those of you that are watching, I'm not going to be filtered anymore. So I'm just going to be laying this out. This could be a bit intense for many people, but there was a lot of experiments that happened with humanity. Some sanctioned events, some unsanctioned events. It created a race called the seed race, which are hybrid alien children who were spliced in the womb. This is a real thing. It did happen. So many of these beings were done properly, and many of these beings were done improperly. The way you know is if you have scarring. If you have scarring, it wasn't a sanctioned op. Anytime that you are experimented on and you get a scar or a wound, it's because they didn't know what they were doing, which is unsanctioned because the beings that would actually do it know exactly what they're doing. So that's important to understand. Second of all, it doesn't affect the children in a way that you think it might. So they have access to abilities and gifts that are a little bit more advanced. Okay. That doesn't mean that they need to stay connected to these sources that are misleading them constantly for them to have those powers. The human soul is still there, even if it's been spliced and affected, because the spirit that chooses the body chose to come into that situation. So all of these things that are going on with the hybrids and with the seed races, as they're called, but ultimately that race is still going to move forward. It's just going to clean itself up. A lot of the darker things that have happened on this planet have already been cleaned up. And so these influences that were pulling at these people, causing them to do horrific things, so to speak, are being shut down now too. So again, like if you don't know what you don't know and you think that what you're doing is what's best for the world, and then you're shown that it's not and you do it again, that's different. But if you're shown that it's not and you go, oh, that's not what I meant to do, that's not at all what I was for, can you be forgiven both ways? Yes, absolutely. Is it easier for me to forgive you if you change your tune once you understand? Yeah. But those that are connected to these ships and all this other stuff that's going on, they're going to lose their connection to that. That is 100% true. Once the cleanup happens and they put the field up, it's going to be like a wipe of all of the signals that were bouncing and keeping things active. So, January is going to be a very strange month for that reason alone. But there's all these other change points in the history of humanity in January, which is going to be really cool. And so the time stream this is going to be one of those choose your own adventure for humanity kind of books. But ultimately, the seed races and those things that did happen, they're going to be fine if they choose to be. Obviously, some of them might say, hey, this is not for me anymore because this contract isn't going to be fulfilled that I came for. And so I want to go out too. And then there might be walk-ins for those because those bodies are still extremely evolved. So it doesn't really make sense to shut down those bodies. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see where we go with that. Because there are a lot of very high dimensional beings that are still looking to come into this world and to help it. So we'll see if we have more walk-ins or not. But yeah, the seed race thing has been something that's been kind of curious for me as well. So good question.
Hmm. Thank you very much. Another very nice question here from Ascension Explorer. And the question is, how do you be vulnerable, yet protect yourself against negative entities?
Oof. Uh,
I know.
So I don't believe that when you are in your truth and your vulnerability that they can affect you. I've been in the war. I've seen things that are very hard to unsee. I've experienced the craziest levels of attacks. I think that many people have experienced that. And I think that it traumatizes us when we have those experiences. But the greatest thing I ever did was put my sword down. Whenever I stopped going to war, whenever I stopped pushing the agenda of one side or the other, and I came into divine neutrality, I realized that in that state of vulnerability, when I'm honest and accepting of what's going on, that I'm basically invulnerable. Even though I'm vulnerable, I'm invulnerable because I'm in that level of acceptance and neutrality, so much so that even the harshest curses that could be heaped on me have no effect. So for me personally, accepting that if something comes up for me, that it's important for me to look at is how I come into vulnerability, which is one of the reasons why I start, whenever I'm judging someone, I go, I'm judging you and I don't want to. That's super vulnerable. As a spiritual teacher, I've been taught that I'm not allowed to judge others. In fact, that's the worst thing ever. So if I do judge people, I should judge them quietly. What? Judge
Or
them
pretend that
quietly?
you're not.
Yeah, really. It's like judge them quietly. Okay, what does that look like? Does that mean like that I type up a huge essay about how they're the evilest person in the world and then I post it in front of everyone? But I'm not judging them. I just want them to be in love. So I'm holding them in a space of love while I'm tearing down their entire character in front of the world. Yeah, that's judging them quietly. Or I can acknowledge and say, I'm judging you and I don't want to. And it's really a choice. So to answer your question, coming into vulnerability is one of the hardest things I've ever done, something that I'm working on daily to be better at. And since I've come into vulnerability, people stop really doing stuff. I haven't had hate mail, death threats. They haven't even tried to swat me in ages. And my address is all over the place, apparently. So that's a pretty big deal. For those that don't know what swatting is, it's where they call 911 on you and say that you're murdering someone so that they bust into your house with assault rifles and things. It's really awkward. It happened to me once. So hopefully it never
I
happens
do
again.
love your use of the word awkward, Jason.
It is awkward. Like you're in the middle of like, doing a session or something and
Ah.
they like bust into your house. It can be weird. So you kind of just have to go with people are gonna do the things they're gonna do. You get to choose how you handle those things. But you don't get to choose whether they do those things or not. And if people show you who they are and they are is not in congruency with who you are, you at least showed them who you are. And then you get to move on. Because when something isn't in congruency, it's just taking up room. And that room could be better occupied. I am going to do a whole live on this, but the one concept that you really should take away from today is room. If my room is so full that I can't take on anything else, then the universe isn't going to give me something else. But if my room is telling me that it needs to let go of certain things, then as soon as I let those things go, I have opening and the universe gives me the next thing. And the next thing is always better than the last thing. Now, does that mean I should give up things before I'm ready to let them go? No, absolutely not, because that's the opposite. Because then you get worse things because you didn't learn the lesson from the thing. But if you were truly being you and your world says no more, we're not allowing you to be you anymore, then you say, thank you, world, bye. And you go build a better world because you're a creator. You can create a better life. You totally can. This world, it's capable to do anything you want. And every day there are more opportunities and options in this world. So you get to choose. But as long as you're not being real with who you are in the world can't be real with you. So you can't have your dreams if you're being fake. You get fake dreams. And fake dreams look pretty at first, but then they get rotten in the core. So it's much better to deal with the vulnerability and losing all that stuff that doesn't make sense so that you can build back on truth and never have to lose it again.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded
Jason,
answer.
but it was a beautiful answer, and I'm so grateful for it. Jason, I agree with you 1,000% around vulnerability and how when a person truly enters vulnerability, the whole idea of vulnerability is that you've got no walls up around you because you don't need them. Because you're in your own divinity inside that vulnerability. and therefore you are infinitely protected, but it's not protected in the form of shielding, because the moment you go into shielding, you're going into resistance.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very individual thing. If you want to protect and shield, do that, but at some point just try it out and feel what it feels like if, instead of focusing on resistance, calling it protection, but it's really what is resistance, and what is the difference really between protection and resistance? It's kind of the same concept. One
Yep.
just sounds nicer. Experiment and see, what does it feel like if I am just focused on coming into the deepest, most vulnerable part of me with all of my authenticity. And you'll know when you're there, because when you're there, it's almost difficult to speak. You almost want to cry because
Yep.
it's so raw and real and true. And I was taught that from the Galactics many years ago, where it was shown to me, what do you think a master being would do? Imagine a master being, and in my mind I imagine Jesus. Imagine a master being, and there are those plotting against this master being. Do you think the master being is going to hide away from them or put up a shield? The master being is going to say, come,
Yep.
come, because in their vulnerability they are in such harmony with the universe, with themselves, with all that is. And it is that which defies the onslaught or the attack or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So,
Or the attackers kill you and you complete your mission.
yeah, yeah.
So,
In which,
that being said, I mean, in the end, the example, the idea can't be killed. The person, the body, totally can. And in the world that we live in, I don't see that happening in the future
mm,
because the ideas are going to not be hidden anymore and they're going to realize that they're the majority, not the minority. So we're headed in the right direction. That being said, if you feel danger, this is very important. There's a huge difference between fear and danger. If you feel danger,
mm,
that's a different experience. So, like, if you're walking down the road and you see an alley and you go, wow, I feel like that alley is a very dangerous alley. But Jason said, be vulnerable. And you go in that alley and you have a weird experience or an awkward experience, I would say. That's because you knew better and you still did it. That's the opposite of what we're trying to say. And I really want to use that extreme of an example because it's a really important understanding to have that there's a difference between protecting from fear and protecting from danger. Protecting from danger is where you know that you should do something. So an example would be if I felt called to put a shield up because my divinity was like, dude, you should put a shield up right now because your human anatomy cannot handle what's coming. I'd be like, okay, cool, shield. And then they'd be
mm,
like, all right, you don't need the shield anymore. I'd be like, okay, cool, no shield. And move on with my life, right?
mm,
Versus, oh, but the story is this and that and that, and then I need to protect even stronger and I need more and more and more and more and more and more. No, because when you give all that you are to your protection, you no longer are. And being is your true protection. A shield is going to deflect from time to time, but your essence is going to deflect permanently.
mm,
You can never afford to give up your essence in any decision because if you do, then you have less of who you are in the next decision. And eventually you leave little pieces of yourself throughout time and space, which is called a time track. And then you have to go back and clean that up. And it's just not worth it because it takes so many more lives just to clean that time track up that you wouldn't have had to live if you had just lived present.
mm,
And again, living presence about your level of access to presence. So if you know better and you choose opposite, then you're splitting your presence. If you don't know better and you choose the wrong thing, then you're not splitting your presence because you don't know better. But the moment that you know better and choose to do it anyway, that's
mm,
when the issue really becomes. It's one of the
mm,
reasons why I don't think that there's horrendous people. I just think there's horrendous acts. Yes, like things that happen that I just can't agree with on any level, shape, or form. But I don't look at the person as the cause. I look at ignorance as the cause, lack of education, a very weird experience that happened to them when they were a kid that led them to believe that that was what was normal.
mm,
It's hard for me to look at a person as evil because we don't know what we don't know, and there's a lot I don't know about anyone. Now, if they want to say that they're evil, then I can see that they're wounded. And I can say, hey, I respect that you want to be evil. And I respect that we're not going to get along. And I respect that you're not going to be in my world much longer. But I really want you to ask why you want to be evil. And then I leave it at that. Because there are people that want to be evil and they don't know why. And it's a core brokenness. Find the core brokenness, accept it, love it, and you can heal. Not everyone's light, not everyone's dark. People are just people. We've identified as light and dark for so long on this planet that we've forgotten that humanity is. It isn't light, it isn't dark, it is. It's a race of gods learning to be gods. Like, why do we have to label it? We're going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. If you learn better from your action, then humanity grows. So learn as you go. Accept that you're going to make mistakes. You're only human after all.
Indeed, you're only human after all. Um, I sit here in my studio right now, and outside I have my alarm on because it would be very unwise of me. I live in South Africa. It would be very, very unwise of me to not have my alarm on. So, yes, be practical and understand the difference between danger and fear. I love how you delineate that. Thank you, Jason. So, there's a question that's come up a number of times, and I think this is going to be the what was that, Joe?
You just had a little fairy.
Oh,
That's
really?
the first time I've seen it on your screen. That's awesome.
Oh, cool. Hello, Fairy. So, this question has come up a number of times, and the question is about birthmarks. I'm not exactly sure, and that's why I haven't asked you yet, because I didn't follow the original question. But I think people are asking about birthmarks and scars, and they're saying, are birthmarks scars? Are birthmarks places where something has happened to the body and it's left some kind of mark on the body?
Okay. I'm going to state this by saying I'm not a master of bodies. So my understanding of it is not going to be like one of those where I've completely perfected it. So this is simply my understanding. I don't have full understanding of this. But the way that I understand it is it's where the soul entered the body and it changes the pigmentation of it. So that is the point where you birthed in to the body as a soul. Your spirit coming into your soul doesn't leave a mark because it's from timelessness into time. But your soul, because as humans, our souls are actually pretty broken, to be honest with you, because we've experienced a lot of things in time. And so when we come in, we don't have that level of perfection that we usually would, as, like, for instance, spirit, which is one of the reasons why the job of the spirit is to integrate the soul completely, meaning to come into wholeness and then to embody that into the human form. But right now, our souls are like a suit of armor, and there can be like little rifts and things like that. So my understanding is that the soul enters the body, and because it's not a perfect signal, it tends to leave a mark. So you can take whatever you see from that, but that again is my working understanding, and I haven't been able to 100% define that yet. It's just what I understand to be.
Hmm.
Everything else I've told you is
I
something that I understand to be at like a level of mastery. This is not one of those things.
Thanks for letting us know. Um, I see the origin of the question, and the origin of the question around the birthmarks and the scars is where you were talking about the hybrids and the scarring. It was directly under that somebody asked the question, what kind of scars are they birthmarks?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That'd be cool if that was the reason. Like if all our birthmarks were because we're aliens, I'd be chill with that. I don't know though. Like I literally,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Yeah.
one of the things that is again one of those vulnerable human things is like if I don't know something, I'm not going to talk about it in a way that makes it sound like I know something because that
Mm.
is just the most mean thing I can ever do. And I know better and I choose better. So I will always tell you, hey, I don't know enough about this thing to talk about it at a level of mastery, but because it's a question being asked, I'm going to answer it as best I can. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, that could be it. We could all be aliens for all I know. I actually don't know about that. I was referring more to whenever the woman is taken to the ship and they
Mm.
splice to put the baby in, because a lot of these women are born, like the children are being born immaculate, meaning like there was no intercourse that led to it. So those usually have scars or no scars. And if it's an immaculate conception with no scars, then it was usually a sanctioned op.
Mm.
But if there is scarring, it almost always means that someone did something that maybe wasn't the nicest of things to do. But it doesn't mean, and for those of you that are moms out there or dads out there that are like, oh, my kid is a demon spawn. No, that's not what it means. Because the child was still a spiritual being that came in, right? And that spiritual being had sanction to come in. So if it was a hijacked experience because of whatever happened, it was still taken care of at a spiritual level. A high level being came in that knew that they could fix the coding and stabilize it. So it doesn't mean that your kid's a demon spawn or anything crazy like that. So don't think that if you did have scarring that your child is forever screwed, because that's not what it is. It's just that a very different being came in to have to take care of that situation. So again, they had those implants though, because that's what happens when they affect the DNA like that. And because the clouds are moving, those implants aren't going to be affected in the same way. So if those kids are hyperactive in a mean way, like they're extreme aggression, all these other things, that's going to cool down because that's those things being pushed on. That's them trying to be taken over. But the thing that's trying to take them over isn't going to be there anymore. I honestly think a lot of the autistic tendencies, that real deep autism, is going to correct itself pretty soon. Because as that cloud goes away, that connection can be brought back. And I'm not saying autistic people are demon spawns either. For the record, that is not what I'm saying. I actually think autistic people are probably some of the brilliant, wisest people and amazing souls on the planet. They just burn resources too fast so they can't communicate properly. But again, whenever that resource is renewed, because there's no cloud that stops it from coming through, and they're able to like come into who they are, everything changes. It's one of the reasons why I named the powder that we're giving out for free, basically, cloud, right? Is because it's a high dimensional resource. Well, whenever you're in that cloud of your spirit, you have everything you need. The Bible talks about it as manna from heaven, but ultimately, that's what it is. It's this space where we have all the resources we need to be all that we are. We can course correct, we can change anything. But for the longest time, the access to that's been limited. There's tons of things in religion and everything around that. So ultimately, all I can say for sure is that as that dissipates, our connection will come online stronger. And for those of you that have jumped out over it, you already know how difficult it is to be embodied at the same time. So you meditate into something and then you come back down. You meditate into something and you come back down. It's exhausting because you're having to bypass this cloud that you had no control over because it was all this negative ET signals. And now that that's being cleaned up and we have access to our true cloud, our celestial origin, and it's coming online again, our bodies are radically going to change. And I think that some of the lack of resource sicknesses that occur on this planet will be sorted out naturally. I'm actually very much looking forward to what comes after January. I mean, first of all, the last Universal Energy Center is called Home. So that's going to be awesome.
Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful. That was actually a question from Tim Buzzer. Hey, Tim, and he asked that question quite a while back. He said, I've just discovered cloud. And the question was, what else could you recommend as we move through the next couple of weeks?
Well, the reason that we gave out the free samples of cloud basically to anyone, it's 1 gram free to anyone that orders $50 or more of products on Void Space, is because you survived 2020, so we wanted to give you an opportunity so that you had the ally to kind of do it easy. The patches are really helpful too. We're going to have those coming out probably in the first part of January. We just got the inventory in, so now we just have to put it together and get it out to the world. But ultimately, like, just being with yourself, right? Tools and technology is great. It helps us to go faster, but we still have to be able to use those tools properly, which requires that we work on ourselves first. As we are stable and we know what we need, then we can reach out for tools. But as I tell everyone before, like before working with activations, before working with coursework, with anything like that we offer or that Carrie offers or that anyone offers, make yourself your first go-to. So I come to me and I go, okay, cool. So now that I'm centered, what's best for me right now? And it might be, okay, take a gram of cloud. And I'll be like, okay, cool. So I'll go get this gram of cloud. And then I get the gram of cloud and I don't open it yet. I just grab the gram of cloud and then I go, okay, so now that I have this, what do I need to do with this? Okay, body, I know you're part of this. So do you want me to physically take this? Do you want me to just hold this for a few seconds? Do you want me to tone with it? Like, what is it that you want me to do? And then I understand that. And then sometimes I'll actually take it. Sometimes I'll just tone with it. Sometimes I'll hold it. Sometimes I'll go to grab it and immediately I'll get the reward that I need and I don't need anything further. We've got to learn to use the tools in the most efficient way for us. And this is important because what's efficient for me isn't efficient for you all the time. So I can't tell you how to do or what to do. All I can tell you is your greatest tool is yourself. So learn to cultivate that. Because when you cultivate that, then the intelligence comes on naturally. That's why it's called divine intelligence instead of intelligent divine. Divine intelligence. In our divinity, intelligence comes online. We're able to use things differently. Everybody asks me why I'm capable of doing what I do, because I'm an inventor, I'm an alchemist, like all these things, right? And the reason is because I cultivated my divine. I was very fortunate to meet somebody that did the same. And I watched what they could do, and I was like, well, if you never read books or ever studied or anything like that, and you're capable of all those things, then I'm not going to do that either. And I went and meditated and really sat with myself and really got to understand myself, because when you bring your divinity online, everything else is possible. You can have conversations with people with PhDs and things and actually change their minds on certain things and have them actually have a conversation with you in their jargon, and you can translate it because divine intelligence. Intelligence is not as strong as the divine, but when the divine is implied with intelligence, you get your soul's destiny instantly. It's incredible what you can do. You can literally just bring all the pieces of your soul that are wounded and begin to mend them so fast that it's not humanly possible. And that's where divinity comes in. It's divinely possible, but not humanly possible. So eventually you let go of the intelligence of what's possible and you come into divine intelligence and everything's possible.
Exquisite, Jason. Thank you so much. My eyes on the comments and just seeing such beautiful conversations. People are talking about asparagus and all sorts in the comment section. Beautiful, Jason. 1:45 for me, and
Yep.
way past my bedtime. I love you all so much, and I would stay longer if I could stay awake longer, but I just can't. I'm sorry.
It's all good. Thank you for having this. And I just knew that it would be great to do it with you because, you work with the galactic. So I figured it'd be a really
Yeah.
fun conversation around ETs. So
Yeah,
thank you very much
exactly. In
for
fact,
being.
today, oh, such a pleasure. Today, I got, I don't know if you get these nudges. I get nudges, and
Yep.
pen goes in hand, and I sit with a notebook. And my nudges were upcoming videos to record all around who we are as galactic beings and how the galactics are working with us and so forth. So keep your eye on my YouTube channel for those videos. It'll be coming out in the next couple of days. But Jason, thank you so much for all your love and for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Thanks to everybody who's with us on the live stream. And I'll speak to you all really soon. Lots of love, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a blessed and beautiful one. Love you guys. Bye.